You know,
Yes,
they always say that Greece is the cradle of civilization. You know, basically removing Africa out of the picture, right?
Greece is a friggin' abomination that should have been bombed right out of the history books.
Mm,
Okay,
mm,
um, Greece was a puppet that was put up on a pedestal to create a psychological barrier between East and West, North and South.
right.
Okay, um, which is where we get this ridiculous story about the Greeks falling out of the sky. Well, jokingly, if it's okay to believe that Greece fell out of the sky, how come it's not okay to view the fact that UFOs come out of the sky too? All right, it's
Yeah.
the same both facts. So the point is this: nobody will ever want to admit to the fact that Greece is merely an extension of Egypt, and that's
Yeah.
all it is. And that's why it's referred to as the Twin Kingdoms,
Right.
because Greece is subordinate to Egypt, okay? And, but it was sabotaged. It was stolen from Asia. There is no such thing, absolutely no such thing as the Middle East. That's a figment of the imagination,
Yeah.
okay? There is only Asia and Europe. That's it. That's why it's called Eurasia. It's not called your Middle Asia, okay? It's called
Mm-hmm.
Eurasia. And Greece was the first sociological experiment towards creating division in the ranks there.
Mm.
And by propping Greece up on a pedestal as this red-headed stepchild that came out of left field, it validated the falsehoods and the false history of where the European came from.
Right.
Because now they had a false foundation to build a lie upon, and that false foundation was Greece.
Right. Right. Right.
Now, Greece was the first step towards that social experiment of manipulation in terms of psychological and emotional warfare against the European, and therefore by extension against the human race as a whole.
Yeah.
And with the success of doing that to Greece, and by extension doing that to Egypt, then came the idea, well, we did this to Greece, we stole it from Asia and gave it to Europe falsely, because Greece does not belong to Europe at all,
Yeah.
okay?
Yeah.
Greece is purely Asian. If we could do it to Greece, guess what? We can, we can create a whole psychological barrier and create this whole other thing out of Greece called the Middle East.
Right.
And as such, Europe goes into Arabia and starts colonizing the living hell out of Arabia like they did to Australia and America,
Right.
and creating these false international boundaries that never existed before.
Mm-hmm.
Henceforth, inventing all of the anguish and strife that exists in the Middle East by colonizing it. But the reason for colonizing it was an extension of what had already happened to Greece. The invention, the psychological invention of the Middle East was for the sole purpose of severing ties between Asia and Europe so that Europe would remain isolated and only see Greece as its foundation.
Right. Right.
And as such, Asia became this forbidden,
Yeah.
unknown area that, just like Greece's animosity towards Egypt,
Mm-hmm.
now this animosity was created between Europe and China, to the point where this results in the Chinese open door policy, the total rape and molestation of Asia.
Mm. Mm.
Because we had this belligerent attitude of like, well, the Chinese won't accept anything from us because they think they're superior. Well, they had a right to. So
Yeah.
did the Egyptians.
Yeah.
You're a bunch of assholes.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
Who the hell wants to communicate with a bunch of ignorant, pale-skinned tightwads who live off of a false history, a false religion, a false prophet, a false civilization known as Greece, which never existed? You think the Chinese didn't know about this? They
Yeah.
knew everything about it.
Yeah.
And that's why they kept the European at an arm's length. They're like, we will offer you our wisdom, but we don't want your bullshit.
The Japanese
So,
were very strong on
yeah.
that point too. That's
Yeah.
probably why they were bombed in the end as well, to make them
Exactly.
subservient.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because the point is, it was, if you could get away with it by doing it to Egypt, you could do it to all of Asia and all of Africa.
Yeah.
Okay? And this is where once the Egyptian university system was shut down and dismantled in favor of Vatican City, several things fell into place. This is what sent Europe into the medieval ages with disease and pestilence, and the Black Plague, because now they were severed from the wisdom of Egypt, and they were relying on the corporate propaganda of the Vatican. And on top of that, this is how Africa goes from being referred to as Mother Africa in the family sense to being referred to this other smear tactic as the Dark Continent, as if to say, this is forbidden territory, you're not allowed to go there, this is, this is a base, degenerate continent, if you go there, you're going to die. If you come out of it, we'll kill you, like we did to Copernicus. Okay? And that's another thing, too. What happened to Socrates later on was repeated again with Copernicus. A little unknown fact about history that nobody wants to talk about. Copernicus did the same exact thing as Socrates. He took his own group of 12 students down, did the forbidden thing, went to Egypt, discovered the mysteries of life there and the occult sciences, and got all the answers he needed, brought it back to Europe, and unbeknownst to him, that was his death sentence right there.
Of course.
Okay?
Of course.
This, of course, was passed on to Galileo from Copernicus, because Galileo started referring to his school of thought as the Illuminati, which was a scientific and philosophical and spiritual reference towards the illuminated minds. And he got the term from Copernicus, who had already gone to Egypt. He called himself and his group of scientists the Illuminati to commemorate the death of Copernicus.
Right.
And unfortunately, over time, because of the propaganda of the Church and the Vatican, the original scientific attributes of the Illuminati turned into this other abomination we have today.